Joining us now, Abigail Spanberger, Congressman, Democrat, 7th District of Virginia. That's the Central Virginia area, and she's in all of my listening studios, Kara. WNTW AM 820, 92.7 FM, WJFN 100.5 FM, WMPH 1010 AM, and all the other stations we're on. We cover 100% of Abigail's district, so that's always fun. That's why she's on with us. Congressman Spanberger, happy Mother's Day. Great to have you on.
Thank you so much for having me on, John.
All right, I hope you had a wonderful Easter.
I had a beautiful Easter, actually. It was a great weekend. I hope you enjoyed yours.
Never better, and I just got back from a week off, so I'm kind of fired up.
Oh, even better.
I know. I had a week off in Myrtle Beach. My son was in a high school baseball tournament there. It was the best vacation ever because my 14-year-old freshman in high school, Abigail, get this, Congresswoman, goes on the bus to Myrtle Beach with the team, stays in the hotel with the team, works out with the team, eats with the team, plays baseball with the team, goes back on the bus with the team. So here's when we saw him on the field. Hi, goodbye, going to the beach, hope things work out. Best vacation. That's like God's vacation. It's like God designed this vacation for me and Ann. Okay, let's get to the issues of the day.
That sounds perfectly relaxing, actually.
I know. And we're going to start with
did he win?
We're going to start with foreign policy and then go to domestic and the subpoena cannons and all that. We're going to get to that. Okay, Yemen, Congress rebuking the president. As you know, full disclosure, I opposed the Yemeni involvement under Obama when he did it. I oppose it under Trump when he's doing it. And I think it's a complete disaster, and I think we need to get out. Congress saying that, but the president vetoing it, and we are continuing to supply the Saudi-UAE coalition in Yemen, which is a bigger humanitarian disaster that is going on right now at the southern border. What say you?
Well, we're in complete agreement on this one, John. There was a bipartisan bill that passed the House and the Senate saying that we wanted to pull U.S. forces from this Saudi-led effort in Yemen. To me, it's really a constitutional issue that Congress, if we are going to provide military assistance, if we are going to if we are going to put any of our soldiers or airmen, Marines in harm's way, then we should absolutely have to take a vote on that. I think this is something that we'll probably agree on more regularly, is the fact that I think that Congress needs to assert and be willing to assert its authority over our war powers, and I find it incredibly troubling that Congress has both abdicated that role and that the president under the last administration and now currently has so willingly been just driven on this path. I think that it's incredibly concerning that President Trump decided to veto this bill. Again, it was bipartisan in the House and in the Senate, which, these days doesn't happen all that often. So I am incredibly troubled by the fact that the president chose to veto this bill.
So let me ask you something, Congresswoman Spanberger. I've been a proponent.
Please call me Abigail, John.
All right, Abigail. Let me just ask you something. And I was equally as critical of Paul Ryan and the House and Boehner, all of them, when they kept burying getting a new AUMF authorization for military force on the floor. In fact, Barbara Lee, who your Democratic colleague in Texas, I believe, or I'm sorry, San Francisco area, Oakland, was on our show 2 times, and she had gotten an AUMF through on, I think it was appropriations, and Paul Ryan dumped it in rules at midnight. It was dead. So now you're in control. Why not bring AUMF to the floor and let everybody weigh in? No, none of the leadership in either party will bring it to the floor because they're afraid they have to make a decision on it. Why not just bring it to the floor?
So I agree with you on this, and I'll tell you that there is a pretty strong group of particularly new members. There's quite a few. There are 8 military veterans in our freshman class, and then I'm a former CIA officer. We have another former CIA officer. So people who have either served in the military or at least been in a very strong supporting role for military actions overseas, certainly engaged in the counterterrorism fight. it is an issue of political will at this point. Many of us have been advocating for updating an AUMF, or at least recognizing that we should not be functioning under a close to 20-year-old authorized use of military force, right? So after 9/11, we determined that we needed to give the president a little bit of leniency and ability to be able to fight the threat of al-Qaeda, and that has morphed into this overarching permission for us to just, for the executive to take aggressive actions throughout the world, ostensibly under this AUMF. And I think that is something that should not continue. And it is something that we're pushing on leadership to bring up. I can't guarantee or speak to when that.
They're not going to bring it up, Abigail. They haven't brought it up. They didn't bring it up. They didn't bring it up over Obama. They didn't bring it up over Trump. Here's why, right?
Yeah.
You guys get so much donor money from the military-industrial complex. You get tens and tens and tens of thousands of dollars. All of these people on all of these committees get so much money from the war machine, and then you turn around and you go on radio shows like mine, and you say, okay, yeah, we need a new AUMF. Tim Kaine does the same thing, but it never gets to the floor. It always gets blocked. It always gets dumped because they never really want to deal with it because the money keeps flowing. So why don't you carry the bill?
Well, that's a good question. And I would also like to note that it's exciting to hear that you seem to be in favor of some campaign finance reform, John. And honestly, this is one of the PAC money for this exact reason. The fact that we do have people who are potentially driving their decisions based on donations that are coming in from corporate PACs, I think is problematic. But separately, there's also a lot of people who just don't want to be on the record voting.
That's right.
To send, it's really a lot easier to blame the president, be it a president you agree with or a president you disagree with, for the actions that we're taking instead of taking ownership over, it's on us if we send people into harm's way. And in terms of, so there is Barbara Lee's bill that would do away with the old AUMF. And then there's actually work in progress to determine how it is that we can, do we call for an updated AUMF? There's actually quite a few points of conversation about how do we move forward. Is it updating the old one? Is it completely doing away with it? Is it kind of not moving forward with this AUMF style kind of long military engagement? And honestly, this is something that really shouldn't be partisan. This is something that really should be about Congress's role, and Congress's willingness to make hard decisions and to have their vote on the record in making those hard decisions. So, while it is something that I think we need to address immediately, I am actually of the mind that we need to get to a point where the conversation becomes less partisan and where we're actually saying, okay, what is our congressional responsibility? And if there are people who don't want to show that responsibility, be they on my side of the aisle, fellow Democrats, or be they Republicans, then we need to bring them to the table and make them accountable regardless of party.
This is nonpartisan wimp out, right? Yeah. Both sides wimp out because they don't want to deal with it. And you let any president off the hook because, like, I want to get out of Afghanistan, and so does the president. It forces a debate in the well of why we're there and what we're doing and what the strategy is. And until you do that, you're not going to be able to have it. So it's a total wimp out by everybody involved. And I'm telling you, it's because it's driven by the military-industrial complex and the money that flows in. It's one of the untold stories that nobody wants to talk about. Now, I want to get to domestic policy, and we're going to get to the crisis at the border in a minute because I'd like to know how you want to solve this. Polls coming out now showing immigration now the number one issue on Americans' minds as they're seeing tens of thousands of migrants pouring into the United States. Can't stop them. Catch and release. Asylum laws don't make any sense. They have a script. But before we do that, people in your party the other day were calling for prisoners serving federal time. Could be a terrorist who blew up, I don't know, a school bus, to be able to vote. How do you stand on that?
I would also just start before I give my opinion by saying that I have only heard of a couple people who have agreed with this point. So I just want to make sure that
Bernie. Wait! No! That you can't get off the hook with that. Bernie Sanders, who is going to be your nominee, who I predict it will be on the top of your ticket in Virginia, running for re-election in 2020. Abigail Sanders is going to be your nominee. And Sanders on television the other day, when press said,
I saw this. Yeah.
they prisoners should vote. So you got to give me an answer on this.
Yeah, well, this will probably be the first of multiple places. Well, this isn't the first place that I disagree with Senator Sanders. I do not believe that, to your example, a prisoner in federal prison on terrorism charges, and I did see that question. They were asked specifically about the Boston bomber, that someone in prison on that type of offense should have the ability to vote. You know, there's a social contract, and when you engage in such an activity and then are sent off to prison to pay your penance to society, I do believe that you give up your freedom and you give up some of your rights. Now, recognizing that, so I feel you should not, if those are the circumstances, you absolutely should not be having the right to vote while you're in jail. After you pay your debt to society, after one leaves prison, particularly for nonviolent offenses, I absolutely think that people should be reenfranchised and have the right to vote once they are back in the community as part of society.
We agree on that.
Yeah,
I agree on that. I was in favor.
I don't know.
I'm in favor of that.
At what point in time we've separated this conversation, but when someone has paid their debt to society, absolutely they should be fully franchised.
Absolutely, and even if they owe a fine,
in prison is an entirely different story.
So what you're saying on the record is that you are opposed to allowing prisoners who are serving time actively to be able to vote.
That is correct.
All right, let's get to, and as far as after they get out, I'm 100% in favor. I was in favor of Terry McAuliffe's initiative to allow former felons to be able to vote, whether they paid fines or not, because we want people to reengage into society. And if I'm the Trump chairman of Virginia again, I'm going to go after those votes. I want them voting for us because I think they have a better chance to have a job. So rather than say you can't vote, go after the votes and stop whining is what the Republicans should do, in my view. All right, let's get to universal health care. It seems to be the big rage now within some in your caucus and running for president that you're advocating, or the party is advocating, a universal government takeover of the healthcare system, outlawing private insurance. That's Bernie's plan. Many others are on board with that, several running for president. Are you for Medicaid for all? I'm sorry, Medicare for all.
So no, I do not support outlawing insurance. No, I do not support a single-payer system. I do not support a government takeover of healthcare categorically. And this is something I've been really consistent on since I even launched the campaign. What I do support is there's a proposal, and I'm a co-sponsor of it in the House, called Medicare X, which is a public option, which would allow people to buy into, of their own choosing, if they so chose, a public option health insurance plan built off of the Medicare network. The structure's there, the reimbursement plans are already there, and that would provide greater competition in the marketplace. It would provide greater options in the marketplace. And if someone chose to continue with their employer-provided insurance, then that is their choice. If someone chose to buy into this public option, then that would be their choice. And that is what I support, and that is what I've co-sponsored now in the House.
Well, I'm in favor of that also. And that was originally proposed some time back by Senator Tim Kaine here in Virginia.
That's right.
And anybody listening to me right now that is opposed to this, let me just ask you something. It's called an option. Options mean that you can do it or you cannot. So if you don't like it, guess what? Don't buy it. If you want to buy it, you have the option to buy it. And when you buy it, it's cost neutral. So if you're a conservative-leaning person, why would you not want an option? Right now you have the option you can FedEx something through FedEx or UPS ground, or you can go to the post office, right? Government control. You have options. If you don't like the post office, go to FedEx. What the hell do I care? It's an option. The conservatives that are opposed to this, it's another thing that makes no sense. So I'm for the public option. You don't like the government involved. You don't like Medicaid. Don't buy it. I mean, it's a simple plan.
And the thing is as the bill's proposed, it's totally cost neutral.
Right.
It is just another option. And the benefit here is, built off the Medicare structure. There's already the reimbursement plans in place. There's already, people are familiar with the Medicare program overall. It would be under the same auspices, so therefore, you don't necessarily have the same advertising, marketing, CEO salaries, and so it's just more competition in the marketplace. And so that's why, I think it's a really easy thing to support because it doesn't actually cost the government anything. It adds to the competition. And the real benefit, right, the goal in having more people with health insurance is it benefits everybody, no matter what type of insurance you have. When somebody can go to the doctor and get an antibiotic when they're not feeling well, rather than show up in an emergency room 3 months later with pneumonia, or if somebody can get their high blood pressure under control rather than show up in an emergency room months later with a major life-threatening event. So, the benefit to having greater coverage across our communities really benefits everyone, regardless of whether, you or I are the ones who actually choose to get this, public option, or whether or not we choose to stay with our current health care. It really is, I think, beneficial overall. And it's more competition. I think that it should be something everybody's on board with.
Options, choices, competition, all good. And if, again, you don't want to buy it, don't buy it. But somebody else might want to be able to buy it. So you're not forcing anybody to do it. That's the beauty of the program. So I'm in favor of that. We agree on that. I've only got a couple more minutes. Another 10,000.
You got to find something to disagree on, John. Make this conversation interesting.
Well, we're about 50-50. Here's one. I don't know how we're going to stand on this, but we've got another 10,000 migrants coming up through South America. Look, we've got a crisis, Abigail, at the border. By the way, we're with Abigail Spanberger, House of Representatives member of Congress, 7th District, Virginia, Democrat, freshman, former CIA. So we've got this 10,000 migrants coming in again. We have this major humanitarian crisis at the border. We have drugs flowing in. We're back to catch and release. What is the Democratic caucus's proposal for this? Or do you even have one?
Yeah, so I think we need to, there isn't a current proposal that aimed at specifically addressing this. I think the things that we've done so far, and I say we as a Congress, and it's in our entirety because it was bipartisan, is we did allocate, I think it was $1.37 billion for border infrastructure, be it fencing, be it wall infrastructure, as requested by CBP. We did fund additional staffing, CBP officers, and immigration judges in our appropriations bill from February. I think one of the major things to remember is that there's currently a backlog of about 700,000 immigration cases, which, I mean, the need for immigration judges is real. You mentioned the quote-unquote catch and release. The issue there is that someone, when they make a claim, there isn't necessarily a judge to hear their case for quite some time, and so then that becomes a challenge of how you handle that. We also funded additional infrastructure for ports of entry for drug detection efforts because the point you make about drugs coming across the border, the majority of drugs coming across the border do so at ports of entry and very, very large shipments. And with CIA, I used to work narco trafficking cases, and so I understand some of the really incredible networks that are driving this drug trafficking, and they use hard-to-detect means, and we have really skilled officers at the border who have, the desire and a lot of lived experience on how to detect some of these efforts to really obscure the fact that there's drugs coming through in trucks of avocados or whatnot. But they do need additional tools, and so we funded that. So those are things that we've done so far. It is not nearly enough because we haven't gotten at the root problem, right? At this point, we're being reactive. We're funding infrastructure. We're funding personnel once individuals get here.
I've only got a minute. What is very quickly, just 15 seconds. Root cause. What is it?
So root cause, a couple things. For asylum, it is the political instability in Central America and the violence that exists in Central America. For that reason, we should not be cutting our aid budget to Central America. We should be providing some support and helping create a
so if we give more money, if we give more money to
country is one thing.
If we give more money to Honduras, that's going to stop the problem.
It's
Come
not
on,
going to stop it
Congresswoman.
completely, but it's certainly, I mean, it is certainly part of the root cause, and we have to look at a variety.
All right, look, I got to go. I'm out of
causes.
time. I'm out of time, but I just have to ask this yes or no question. Impeach the president, Abigail Spanberger, yes or no, right now?
Right now, I
Yes.
don't have enough information to make that. I've got a lot more questions than I have answers, and I'm not going to make on such an important matter, I'm not going to make a ill-informed decision.
No, you sound like Mark Warner. More questions than answers, but there's all the answers are in the Mueller report.
Well, but here's the thing: more than 10% of it's redacted, and so I'm a former CIA officer. I like to ask a lot of questions. I'm a former federal agent. My question is, it says that information is redacted because of ongoing criminal investigations. Who's being investigated? Is it multiple different investigations? Like a lot of those things are, I think, incredibly relevant to how we move forward. The overall concern that I have with that report, though, is the thing that I hope people will start talking about more frequently. The question is, what are we doing about the fact that we know that a foreign adversary nation attacked our election infrastructure, regardless of the outcome? We can talk about that later. Regardless of the outcome, our elections infrastructure was attacked. They hacked us. They spearfished
We'll talk about.
They attacked us. And how are we aggressively dealing with that?
We'll talk
and
about
I think
that
every
next.
American,
We'll talk about that
political
next
party,
week.
should be up at arms about that.
Congresswoman Abigail Spanberger, we'll talk about that next week. But right now, I've got my producer waving her arms, telling me I've got to get out at the bottom of the hour. Thank you very much for being with us. Spirited conversation. If I don't talk to you next week, have a very happy Mother's Day.